The story of Adam and Eve is one we all think we know, right? Creation, the garden, the snake, the apple, and then, boom, they're kicked out of paradise. But that's usually where the story just stops. What if I told you there's a sequel? A whole forgotten chapter that picks up right after they walk out of the garden. Well, today, we're diving into that story. Seriously, just think about it for a second. What happened the day after? What was life really like on the other side of that paradise? And, how did the very first humans, who were technically created to live forever, deal with the one thing they were never supposed to experience? Death. To get those answers, we've got to look past the book of Genesis. We have to turn to this incredible ancient text that honestly feels like a lost chapter of the story, a forgotten sequel, if you will. It's called The Life of Adam and Eve, though sometimes you'll see it referred to as the Apocalypse of Moses. Now, just so we're clear, this isn't part of the official biblical canon. It's what's known as an apocryphal text. But for centuries, this was the story people read to get this deeply emotional, really dramatic account of humanity's first family. And listen, this isn't just some old wives' tale. We're talking about a real, physical manuscript, a document that's actually survived all this time, preserving this incredible story of what happened after Eden. So, what did this new life look like? Well, as you can probably guess, the first chapter of their story outside the garden can pretty much be summed up in 3 words: a life of toil. I mean, the world outside the garden was tough. It was completely unforgiving. This text paints this picture of just immense struggle, a life that was suddenly defined by pain and backbreaking labor. It's just such a brutal contrast to the paradise they'd lost. And you can really feel the emotional weight of it all in Adam's own words. At one point, he tells his children he is crushed by the burden, and you get the sense he's not just talking about physical work. This is a deep spiritual exhaustion from carrying the weight of his actions for so long. And then, their sorrow gets 1,000 times worse. The text actually recounts the moment they find their son Abel, who's been murdered by his own brother, Cain. Can you imagine? They experience the world's first death, its first murder, and the first absolutely devastating grief of a parent losing a child. So after centuries of this suffering, the story takes a really dramatic turn. As Adam is lying on his deathbed, he sets in motion one last desperate quest, a quest for mercy. And just to put this in perspective, Adam is 930 years old. After nearly a millennium of life, he knows his time is almost up. He gathers all his kids around him because he can just sense that his long, hard journey is finally coming to an end. He's in agonizing pain, and in this total last-ditch effort, he turns to his son Seth with what sounds like a completely impossible request. He needs him to go on a journey all the way back to the one place they can never, ever go again, the Garden of Eden. The mission is pretty straightforward, but it's a long shot. Seth has to get to the gates of paradise, beg God for mercy, and somehow bring back just a single drop of oil from the tree of life. Adam is convinced it's the only thing that can ease his suffering. But as Seth gets ready to leave on this impossible mission, Eve is watching Adam suffer, and she's just overcome with guilt about her role in all of it. And it's in this moment that she gathers their children to finally tell her side of the story. Eve steps forward and basically says, "Okay, everyone, listen up. You need to hear this from me. I'm going to tell you exactly how this all went down." It's this incredibly powerful moment where she finally takes control of her own narrative. So, she takes them all the way back to that fateful moment with the serpent, and she reminds them of that famous tempting promise, that if they ate the fruit, their eyes would be opened, and they would become like God, knowing both good and evil. But the result wasn't power at all. And this quote from Eve is, wow, it's just devastating. She says that the second she ate it, she didn't feel like a god. She just felt exposed. She felt, in her words, bare of the righteousness that had once covered her. The loss was immediate, and it was total. As you might guess, Seth's quest doesn't work out. The oil from the tree of life is denied. And so, the final act of this incredible story begins. The time has come for the very first human funerals. So Adam takes his last breath. But his death is anything but a quiet end. No, the text describes this incredible scene where angels actually descend from heaven to carry his soul away. And in that very moment, God himself speaks directly to Adam with a promise. And here it is, that incredible exchange. God reminds Adam of his mortality. I told you that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. But then he immediately follows it with this powerful assurance. Again, I promise you the resurrection. So in this telling of the story, death is not the end of the line. And just 6 days later, Eve knows her time has come too. Her final prayer is just so deeply moving. She begs to be buried right next to Adam so that they wouldn't be separated in death the way their sin had separated them in life.
This story wraps up with this one last really poignant scene. Angels appear to their grieving son, Seth, and they actually give him instructions. They're teaching humanity for the very first time how to mourn, how to handle loss and death.
And this is where the story leaves us with something I don't think anyone would expect. The angel tells Seth, do not mourn beyond 6 days. Why? Because the 7th day is for rest and rejoicing. Because, the text says, on that day, God himself rejoices when a soul has passed from the sorrows of this world to eternal peace.
So a story that started with this catastrophic fall from grace ends not with eternal punishment, but with a promise of resurrection and an actual command to rejoice. It really leaves us with a fascinating question, doesn't it? What does this forgotten sequel tell us about our own deep, enduring need to find hope and mercy and even joy on the other side of failure?